Invincible has returned to us from a long hiatus, and with a new season, we have new friends, new foes, and new Invincible Explained videos. Today's video is our first video on Season 2, but feel free to check out all of our previous full character breakdowns on characters like Mark Grayson, Omni-Man, Alan, Battle Beast, and many others. Before we begin, if you enjoy these videos, drop a like. It takes half a second, and it's the only way to tell the YouTube algorithm that more people should see videos from the mighty. The second season of Invincible is primarily going to focus on a character that many people consider to be Mark Grayson's actual arch-nemesis, Angstrom Levy. I know, it's Levy. My old videos said Levy, and I'm sure I'm going to hear about that for the next 10 years anytime I mispronounce anything. And as we begin, keep in mind that this video is not going to cover every single issue, conversation, or action that Angstrom takes, but it will cover the vast majority of the most important elements to his comic history. Additionally, in order for the story to make sense, I may not necessarily cover every event as it occurred in the comics, but rather in a way that presents it most logically. Angstrom Levy was not always a bad guy, but after a freak accident, he became one of the most dangerous opponents Mark has ever faced. So with that being said, today I bring you the complete history of Angstrom Levy. Angstrom Levy made his first comic book appearance in Invincible 16, written by Robert Kirkman and drawn by Ryan Ottley. The main version of Angstrom that we as viewers and readers care about was born with the ability to travel between multiple dimensions and points in space-time. There is an infinite universe of dimensions, and he is unique in his ability to create portals between them. However, other than that power, which is awesome, he doesn't have any other special abilities. He isn't super strong or durable or anything like that. When we first encounter Angstrom, he's helping another version of himself from an alternate reality escape the vicious persecution of that dimension's Mark Grayson and Omni-Man. In this reality, Mark has sided with his father and the two have begun their conquest over Earth. In the show, Angstrom reveals that most realities that have a Nolan and a Mark see them team up to take over Earth in the same fashion. Angstrom develops a plan of action, but the scope is larger than just saving people from Mark or Omni-Man. He begins traveling across multiple dimensions and recruiting nearly infinite versions of himself. Considering there are infinite realities, that means infinite access to technology, cures for diseases, and knowledge, and Angstrom begins his journey with the goal of helping trillions of people across the multiverse. In order to do this, he springs the now incarcerated Mauler twins from their Supermax prison, along with other multi-dimensional Maulers, and he asks them to complete work on a device that will link this dimension-hopping Angstrom to the thousands of others that he's going to recruit. The device that he's building will essentially beam all of the knowledge from these alternate Angstroms into one main one, giving him nearly infinite knowledge from the multiversal expanse. The device itself uses a massive amount of energy, which triggers a security notice to Cecil, who sends Mark Grayson after them. Mark arrives and, admittedly confused, sees the Mauler twins and starts a battle, assuming they are up to their old bullshit again. The Maulers do get the upper hand on Mark and nearly beat him to death before Angstrom attempts to stop them by taking off the helmet of the device that's beaming all the info into his brain. The resulting explosion kills all of the Maulers in attendance except one and horribly disfigures Angstrom. Angstrom pops out of the debris and he looks horrible, just truly awful. He's like a mullet made out of brain matter. It's not good. Angstrom is mortified, to say the least. The man's life goal was just destroyed in front of him by a person who, in his eyes, is evil in many different dimensions. And from this point on, Angstrom goes from good guy trying to do good guy stuff to wretched piece of shit who becomes one of the worst villains in comic history. I mean, that's in my opinion. Angstrom vows revenge and disappears into the multiverse to get help for the extreme damage he's suffered. From this point on, we don't see Angstrom for a little bit. Angstrom ends up having his body rebuilt by a race of aliens named the Technicians, and after a few months he returns to Mark Grayson's home dimension, now armed with a ton of new information on him. Mark goes to Africa to visit Adam Eve with his girlfriend Amber, and while they're there enjoying what might be the most awkward lunch date ever, Angstrom breaks into Mark's home and kidnaps his mother and Mark's new half-brother, Oliver. Angstrom calls Adam Eve on her what appears to be a Nokia flip phone from 2003, and he tells her, "Look, you gotta put Mark on the line because it's about to go down. I got your mom and your brother, and I'm kidnapping everybody out here." Mark rushes home to confront Angstrom, who now holds his family hostage. Angstrom reveals he spent all this time since they last met enhancing himself and learning about Mark's behaviors. Invincible rushes Angstrom, who creates a portal to another dimension, slinging Mark into a random dinosaur-infested reality. But the dinosaurs here talk, so that's pretty cool. We learn that Angstrom has prepared a number of realities for Mark to travel to with the hopes that he's gonna die in one of them. If he dies, Angstrom will let his family go. If he lives and he continues to fight, he will continue to hurt or kill them. The second dimension that Mark goes to is the Marvel Universe, and we have a whole video on that, and you can check out the link on the screen now to learn about that standalone issue where Invincible teams up with Spider-Man. Angstrom hurls Mark through a myriad of dimensions. One resembles Kirkman's Walking Dead universe, another sees him battling Omnipotus, another sees Mark in the DC universe with the GOAT Batman. But again, Angstrom brings Mark back, but this time Mark grabs him before he can be shuttled to some new dimension. However, it's revealed that Angstrom's body is now significantly stronger and more durable than before. Remember how I said he didn't have any powers? Well, now he has durability and strength. The two start fist fighting across various dimensions before landing in a wasteland-like desert. The next part is actually really key, though, to understanding Mark Grayson's mentality as a hero. Mark ends up beating Angstrom nearly to death. He sort of loses himself in the moment and thinks that Angstrom is more durable than he actually is. And despite everything Angstrom has done, Mark is very haunted by his actions. Mark wanders around the wasteland for about an hour until he's rescued by that dimension's Guardians of the Globe, who reveal to Mark that while those events happened moments ago to Mark, for them it's been 15 years, and without their Mark Grayson, the planet kind of goes to hell. The Guardians team helps Mark get back to his home dimension, but before he leaves this dimension, Adam Eve tells Mark that she is in love with him for the first time in the series, and this acts as a catalyst to end Mark's relationship with Amber when he comes back. But this video is about Angstrom, and you cannot keep a good dimension-hopping psychopath down. Angstrom's body is recovered by the technicians again and rebuilt again. Angstrom continues to monitor Mark at his home with these really weird, tiny floating cameras, and Mark eventually ends up catching one, and he believes that it's Cecil monitoring him. However, Robot tells him that this tech is far too advanced. We now learn of the next phase of Angstrom's plan. You see, Angstrom has been assembling a multiversal team of Mark Graysons to invade our Mark Grayson's home dimension. He unleashes this full force on Mark's home dimension in an event called the Invincible War, and he asks them to destroy anything and everything they come across. The goal here is to make Mark's own world fear and hate him even more than they do after the events of Mark vs. Omni-Man. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how did Angstrom manage to recruit a number of Mark Graysons when he couldn't even take one by himself? Well, that's actually pretty interesting. He just promised all of them to use his technology to better all of their lives and expand their own unique Viltrum empires in their home dimensions. The Invincibles attack and the battle is horrendous. The destruction is on a global scale, and our Mark has to somewhat retreat after Adam Eve is badly injured. During the final battle with the Marks, Rexplode destroys himself to kill one of the more formidable Marks, and despite the heroes fighting valiantly, they end up losing to the multiversal Mark squad. Angstrom, being Angstrom though, does double-cross the remaining Marks left over, and he strands them in that wasteland dimension from before. After witnessing the death and destruction caused by the alternate reality versions of himself, Mark also begins to question his decision to show mercy to his enemies. Mark eventually does confront Angstrom, overpowers him, and Mark's kid brother, Oliver, pleads with Mark to finally kill Angstrom once and for all so he doesn't cause any more death and destruction. Mark ends up agreeing with Oliver, but Angstrom is able to escape. The technicians again fixed Angstrom, who lost his hand in the previous battle, but in exchange for their service repairing Angstrom each time he falls against Mark, he ends up owing them. Angstrom now has to spend some time, let's say 30 issues roughly, helping them get set up with a new homeworld and yada yada yada. It doesn't matter, the technicians are never important other than the fact that they fix up Angstrom. We do not see Angstrom again until issue 100, and this portion of the series is called The Death of Everyone, where another villain named Dinosaurus has just completed killing millions of people in flash floods across the globe. He even tricks the rest of the planet into thinking that he killed Mark Grayson, when in reality it was just this clone that he destroyed. It's convoluted, but it happens. Angstrom arrives back in the world only to find that somebody else had already killed his Mark Grayson. Angstrom does eventually learn that his Mark is still alive and again focuses his rage at the ones closest to Mark. He breaks into Mark and Eve's house and he holds Eve hostage. Mark arrives home and is instantly transported back to the Wasteland dimension from like 70 issues before this. There, he finds the one remaining Mark from the alternate dimensional versions of Invincible still alive and feeding on the deceased bodies of the other 7 like some kind of Cannibal Corpse album cover. But that's actually not as important as what happens back in the home dimension of Mark Grayson, where Angstrom continues to taunt Adam Eve. And you might be thinking, why doesn't Eve, who's basically Dr. Manhattan, just fight Angstrom? At this point in the series, Eve can't use her powers due to the fact that she's pregnant, and using them might actually harm her unborn child. But what's most interesting here is that Eve does something even more valuable than fighting Angstrom. She actually talks to him. She essentially makes Angstrom Levy realize that he has lost his way. Rather than helping trillions across the multiverse, he's dedicated his life to losing battle after battle against one singular Mark Grayson. Angstrom's memories were all scrambled and he spent his whole life attacking Mark over and over again for something that didn't even happen. It was his own fault. One line specifically here is extremely powerful and it just shows how great of a character Adam Eve really is. She says, "Do you ever stop to consider what you could be accomplishing if you stopped blaming Mark for something that wasn't his fault and instead tried to carry on with whatever mission you were trying to do in the first place?" At this point, Angstrom quits. He brings back both Mark Graysons from the alternate dimension and he surrenders. He realizes the harm that he's caused and he gives up. But in a move shocking absolutely no one, the alternate Mark Grayson grabs him and pushes him into a portal back to his own home dimension, and that's that. Angstrom is basically out of their lives from that point on, but Mark is not satisfied. No, not by a long shot. Angstrom has come back too many times. Mark asks Robot to help track Angstrom down across the multiverse, and the two travel to where Angstrom is believed to be. We learn that the alternate dimension Mark has been torturing Angstrom and using his teleportation abilities to expand his own version of the Viltrum Empire. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, wow, this is brutal, even for a guy who caused a lot of death and destruction. But shockingly, Robot ends up double-crossing Mark, and he ends up killing the alternate Mark Grayson, and he ends up decapitating Angstrom Levy, ending his threat forever. This kind of robs Mark Grayson of his vengeance, but I like to think that Mark, after seeing what had become of Angstrom, probably wasn't going to kill him anyway. Now, if you want to learn more about why Robot did that, feel free to check out his individual video because that story is very long and complicated, and it definitely doesn't have as much to do with Angstrom, who's the subject of this video. But that is it for Angstrom. That's how he dies. The last thing I will say is that we do see that Angstrom had a son in the final issue of Invincible, and that his son swears vengeance against Mark for the death of his father, but considering the series is over, I doubt we'll ever get any resolution to that. And that is it for the entire comic book history of Angstrom Levy. I hope you guys learned a lot, and if you did, consider hitting the like button, subscribing, and doing all that other crap that YouTubers ask you to do. We already have a ton of Invincible videos with millions of views, so feel free to check those out on all your favorite characters as well. This has been Nick with Key Issues. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember the motto, Angstrom Levy over everything.